Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today is Barbara Kleeb from Switzerland, and she is a coach to Polymaths. And she reached out to me about a year ago, and invited me to join in with her group of Polymaths that she works with on a regular basis. And I've been involved with her for a year, and she was a guest on the podcast back last spring. And Barb, I'm really glad that you're here, and thank you for the work you do. It's really important. I hope you get enough
Thank you.
strokes and appreciation for the work you do, because I think there are a lot of us who need the kind of encouragement and direction that you provide.
Thank you so much. It's the work in itself is giving me satisfaction and giving back, and then I really get a lot of appreciation, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, I'm glad for that, because it's important. Folks, one of the things she does is she holds I'm going to call it a salon or a networking event every other week. And she comes with a little topic, and it's always interesting, the conversation and there's usually about 20 people there.
Yes,
Yeah,
normally.
it's a dynamic group. Let's talk about what you've been interested in lately. What your mind is kind of wrapping yourself around. Your own sense of being a polymath is drawing upon all these different things to kind of focus you on a particular topic. What is that you're thinking about these days?
So I was actually thinking, what's the thing that that would support polymaths the best? Because I wanted to provide a course for polymaths. And the thing I think is the way that the mind of a polymath works is not linear. It's not step by step thinking, but they need to enter a state of flow where they're kind of comfortable and at ease, and then they can work at their best as leaders, as whatever they want to do.
Would you, for those who may not know these terms, what would you define both what a polymath is and what flow is? Can you give us an idea there?
Yes, polymath is a person that has, for me, at least 3 deep interests that are in different fields. It can be 3 PhDs, but it doesn't have to be a studied uh, polymath, because I think Einstein didn't even finish one study, nor did Leonardo da Vinci or something like, or people like this, or um, Hedy Lamarr. She was an actress by trade, but so a lot of people that we know as polymaths didn't even finish one study. So I would say it's not fair to say now you have to finish 3 PhDs. But if there is a person who does 3 PhDs, it's probably a polymath.
Yeah.
And then those people have a different way of thinking. They don't think linearly, they think in systems, which is something different. And a system doesn't even exist. So a system is a mental construct on what you're dealing with. And it's obviously connected to other things. And so it's a different way of thinking.
You just said something that was very provocative. You said, if I remember what you said that a system is just a concept.
Yes.
And so what is it a concept of?
How you perceive the world.
Okay.
So a system is only your concept right now about anything you can perceive, I would say. And you, of course, do have a different system than I do. Because we have different perspectives. So you cannot go into a business and say, the system of this business is blah blah blah. From whose perspective? Is it from the cleaning lady's perspective, or from the CEO's perspective, or blah blah blah? And what are all the experiences that lead to the perception that they have now? Maybe they have, I don't know, a car accident, and then they have a totally different perception than they had yesterday.
So in order to have flow, to be in flow, maybe that's a better way of saying it, to be in flow.
Yes.
Does it require us to have some kind of systematic perception of the world?
No, I would say it's the other way around. If you have a systems perception of the world, you need to be in flow. And from my point of view, you need that consists in different things. You need to be grounded, because if you're just floating around in thin air, then you never land anywhere. You're kind of a balloon. So that doesn't help anyone.
We're talking at a very high conceptual level here, which
Yes.
I love, and this is part of what Polymaths do. So let's bring this down to the average life that most of us live. So what does flow look like, from the time we get up in the morning until the time we go to bed at night? What does that look like to you?
Flow, if I live in flow, and this can be some moments I do and some moments I don't.
Okay.
In the moments I live in flow, everything seems really effortless. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm a gynecologist and I'm doing surgery. And I think surgeons often are operating in a state of flow. And why do we even operate in a state of flow? It is because we're challenged, but not overly challenged. If we're overly challenged, we cannot be in flow, because we're kind of stressed out. And if we're bored, we cannot be in flow because we're not challenged enough. So that's actually a good way to get to flow. And then I think it depends on where your focus is. When you say that you set the day, when you wake up and blah blah blah. I mean, I start with meditation, because then for me it's much easier to access the state of flow where my brain works optimally. So I'm doing that every morning.
So it sounds like to me, flow is where we reach some place in our lives where the things that we're talented at and the things that we've become proficient at are now in sync. And that is it like working, instead of being very analytical and making, having to be almost operating by the numbers, working through a set of questions or a set of steps, and of always consciously being aware of the steps that we're taking. We're unaware of the steps, and we're just aware of where we're going. Is it more intuitive? Is it a more intuitive?
Yeah, I would say that if you're in flow, your intuitive channels are much more open. So sometimes we get some insights and we don't even know where they come from. That just come from, I think it's a field of knowing, or whatever, however you call it. You could say divine inspiration, whatever your system is. But it's you're open to that. And when you're totally analytical, you cannot even perceive this channel that gives you this intuition.
Well, then it seems to me then that we're at a a point of emergence of flow, a point of emergence where polymaths can demonstrate their superpower, shall we say, and where polymaths can be in flow, because we're moving out of an era where the organizational structures of the world were very mechanical and very rote. And now there's a lot more freedom and a lot more opportunity for people to work out of their sense of what is possible. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you're totally right. I think silos are the enemy of a polymath because they know that a silo is never true. So a silo is kind of like a box, like you have to deal with finance only. But as a polymath, you know that there's no finance only, because finance is just also a function of HR, like of personnel management with people, or finance is also a function of the what the board does and the CEO and all those things. So there are no real silos. But in some years ago, we were so restricted, and we were also inside of the houses, so were just believing that those silos really existed, but they never did. And a polymath always knew that the silos are not really real. But in the silos, people developed languages that others couldn't even understand. But if you're a polymath, you want to understand everything. So you want to understand what each silo does, because only then it makes sense to you.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I look back at my childhood, and in my family, we had dinner together every night, and my father would come home. He was an HR guy in a corporation, and he would complain about his boss every night. And it taught me, well, I certainly want to do, I don't want to do what he's doing, because I don't want to be, under that kind of pressure. That's not the language I would have used then, but that's what I felt. And so I went
Yeah.
off a totally different, and I'm still trying to find myself in that sense, because my interests are so broad. And so, but what I realized was that the structures are very, they're like enclosures that need to be broken out, and there needs to be openness so that people have a chance to discover more of what they can be. And I think that's where we're headed. I think we're headed in that direction where there's it's I guess the other way to say it is, in those old enclosed mechanical structures, things operated very slowly. There wasn't much flow. And you break that out, and you just let people go and let people express their native ingenuity, and flow begins to happen.
Yeah, and you can also think about what would a polymath do coming into a business and not having kind of like a task that he has to do. He would sit down with everybody, or sit everybody on a table, and then get those silos together, and there will be intersections and flow working in the silos. You cannot make any innovation in one silo.
Well, that's why there hadn't been much innovation in the past 50 years. It's because those silos, and the transitions we're going through are so difficult, because the people who created those silos want to hold on to their power, and they want their prestige and their position. And so it's an interesting thing to see happen. And I wonder, this is what I wonder, Barbara, whether so many of these young people who are saying, I'm not going to work in the old ways that my parents, my grandparents did, are really expressing maybe a latent polymathic tendency there that needs to be encouraged, but they have not ever been in a social or educational environment where that was encouraged. What do you think?
I love this thought. Yeah, I think all the young entrepreneurs, the ones that actually found a business, they need to be polymaths. They cannot just deal with one subject,
Right.
because they need to deal with all the subjects, and the silos are just emerging in a business that is big enough to even have silos. If you're a solopreneur, you're doing everything.
A year ago, I spent 2.5 hours with a group of students from St. Gallen University there in Switzerland, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, it was so good. You know, it wasn't what I expected. I thought we'd have an hour together, and it was 2.5 hours. And so these are all Gen Zers. They're all in their 20s, so that has to be taken into account. And there were three things that emerged from what they were telling me, and I think this is really important. One is that they're disappointed with the way the world is. The second thing is that they have fear about the future. They have concerns. They're afraid about the future. But the third thing was the real money thing. I just loved it. They wanted to know what it meant to have purpose. And here they are, students at a fine university, and they don't know what it means to have purpose. Now, what has happened that has caused that to be? You know, and I think if they had the opportunity, when they found purpose, they would also find that there's a world of things for them to explore that makes it more likely that they would be successful in life, whatever we want to call it.
Interesting you're saying that. So in the course I'm starting with Polymaths in January, I will teach them meditation so they can also be in a better flow state, but also find their purpose. Because as a polymath, you have so many interests everywhere, but there are some interests that are like deeper within, or they bring more connections and they bring you more joy. And I find it's very important to really find out what that is. And I think as young people, it's kind of normal that they don't know that yet, because they are still in the exploration phase. And I think exploration goes outwards into different fields, and so and so and so, and you might not know what lights you up, because you're not a specialist and you should never be one.
The whole
But
system, there we use that word again.
yeah,
The whole system is oriented around making you a specialist with an expertise that is very narrow and
yeah,
not very useful.
yeah. So I think it was useful for some, it is useful for some contexts and
Yeah.
for some people. But
Yeah.
if you're not operating, if your internal operating system is not operating in that way, it's just painful.
It is. You know, I went through college with this strong sense that I didn't belong there because everything was so narrow. You know, I remember taking in my first semester, I took a religion course, a history course, a literature course. I had a freshman English course, and an art history course. And with those first three, religion, history, and literature, I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to read all this? There is no way. And by the time I graduated 4 years, I didn't read a complete book the whole time I was there, because I was every book I was reading it, and my mind was going elsewhere, of seeing all these other connection points to what was being said on the page. And I'm thinking, what am I do? What do I do? Who am I? And I end up as an American Studies major, which meant I got to decide what I wanted to study, and it had real points of interest, and so that worked out well. But it was still that sense of I don't really belong in this, but I love doing this. I mean, I love it at the same time. And I think that's what you have been doing with all of us who are polymaths is really connecting to all those different strands of interests that we have, and you're providing a place for us to have a conversation where we can come and we can bring all those together in a congenial way that respects one another, and we really enjoy being with you.
So much. I mean, I never felt this restriction. I think it's I've discussed this with there's an American lady who has done the first thesis on polymaths. She's called Angela Cotelesa. And we had a discussion once. She said, and we discussed about what did your parents tell you? And my parents told me I can be anything.
Yeah.
And I had this mindset, and I didn't think, oh, I have to choose one thing and then that's that. Because first I was a photographer and then I studied medicine, but it was against
And you're a
no.
musician.
Yeah, I'm also a musician. I'm also a coach. I'm also whatever I did afterwards. But it was never. I didn't need to fit into fit.
I had the same experience with my grandmother. My mother's mother told me I must have been 11 or 12. She said, "You can do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name."
So cool.
And and I've said that I've used that story many times, and people say, "Oh, that sounds awful." I said, "No, it was freedom. It was freedom," and it has been a guiding motivation for me all my life, and I'm grateful for my grandparents for that. And yeah, it's so I feel like I'm in flow most days.
Yes.
Um, and so here's another facet of this I'm curious about. The difference between people who are multitaskers and single taskers. What and whether those things contribute to flow or are a detriment to flow.
Interesting. So I don't think that multitasking is a wise thing to do for anyone, but it's sometimes necessary. So if you're a mother, you need to be able to cook and have your baby on your hips or on your neck
Yeah.
and have your spidey senses 360 degrees around you. But it's known that not even women are really good at multitasking as good as doing. I think it's better to do one task, finish it, and then do the next task.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm not a multitasker at all, and when I'm having to multitask, it creates all kind of chaos. So chaos is not flow. There's another connection point of people talk a lot about chaos theory, complexity theory, flow, and somehow they all need to kind of come together in a meaningful way so that we understand what our lives actually should be like.
It's interesting you saying that. Yeah, chaos is not flow. It's chaos is distraction. It's maximum distraction, and you don't know what to do. But when you're in flow, you always know what to do, and it's easy. Stuff comes easy to you that in all other states or for all other maybe people who need to do the task that you're doing would be very hard, but you can just do it. I mean, I recorded my music in Cuba. I'm not a musician. I wrote my songs. I recorded the recordings with the piano and with my voice, and I was there amongst all the professional musicians, and I knew I needed to get them attracted to my music to actually do their best work. So I first told them a story, and then we just improvised on on the stuff that I did. And I was there. I was really in a flow state. I was like, yeah, I like that. I don't like that. Can you repeat that? Oh, I heard this little melody. And I did the recording in a time that is even astonishing for a professional musician, because I was in a flow state. And that was leadership, effortless, and flow.
You know, I think that I'm speaking from my own experience, but I treasure chaos because what it calls for is for the integration of the chaotic parts into something whole and meaningful, and that serves a direction. And so I feed off of chaos, change, transition. Yeah, it has a there's a cost to it, but that cost is, you know, it's really it's okay. It's really okay. And so, because what I found, let me just describe it this way. What I found is that people see all chaos as risky, when chaos is actually, there's a beneficial side to it, because it's disrupting old patterns that need to be disrupted so that new patterns can emerge from that. And I think that's one way of looking at it. But a lot of the groups and a lot of the people that I've worked with over the last 50 years don't like that at all. And so they want things to remain the same as they've always been. And so they're never in flow. They're in some kind of, I don't know what you call it, suspended animation.
Interesting. Yeah, chaos is the beginning, I think. When you're looking at system thinking, it's lay out the mess is the first step of system thinking. And then make sense of the mess is the second step. So the chaos and you not knowing, I find it's a very powerful state, because it's the kind of the total creative state where stuff starts to happen.
Yeah.
And magic appears.
So this new program that you're starting, tell us more about what you're doing there, and what you want your participants to come away with.
I will teach them a meditation practice. I will have different tools to find the purpose. One is a more spiritual tool, so I do Akashic record readings. Another one is more like an organizational tool. I work with the Venn diagram of Ikigai. I have several tools that help them overcome their traumas, because I think if you're having a trauma, then it can block the flow. And when you can release the trauma, then the flow can actually start and you're having a much better life. So, and I have some really cool tools that don't take so long times, and they're kind of magical to apply. And then I'm also doing some creative things that they can try out and find out what's best for them to kind of have some creativity in their everyday life, so that they can develop a daily practice that is beneficial and also have a lot of other benefits.
Is this a group oriented program, or?
Yes, it's a group program.
And how long does that program, what's the kind of the time frame for the program?
It's 12 weeks.
12 weeks.
And I took it, I designed it for 12 weeks because I wanted the people to actually do something and stick with it.
Yeah.
If it were just 4 weeks, you could just go and float away. But 12 weeks, if you've done something for 12 weeks, I think chances are much better that you stick with it.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I think there are many people that will benefit from it because they're looking, when your head, let me put this in, when your head is filled with all kinds of ideas in it, it's so marvelous. I mean, I was going through stuff this morning here, and there's a that shelf right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's full of what I would call the philosophy of science. It's about complexity theory. It's about order. It's about all these different things. It's about design. It's all those different concepts in science. I'm not a scientist, and I was looking at this. I wish I had the time to read all that. I need to get into that, and therefore my sense of chaos is I've increased my chaos because I have other stuff I have to deal with right now. But those sorts of interests are always there waiting for me to be triggered to pull that book off the shelf and, oh my, that's, and then figure out what do I do with this, other than just be fascinated by the brilliance of some of these minds. That's the chaos. That's the chaos.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I read you something earlier, and I may just read it here because I think,
yes, please.
I think it's worth talking about. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from this book called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns. You can get it in Kindle and also in hardback from Amazon. And he's going to say something, and you've heard me read this. I read this to you earlier. I think this is really important, and this describes me. The generalist, which I think we could also call a polymath, though I don't think they're exactly the same thing.
I don't think they're exactly the same thing, but they're similar.
For just illustration purposes.
Yeah.
The generalist is drawn to the problem he has not yet solved. Complexity theory, chaos theory, flow theory, all those things have yet to be resolved, and so we're going to jump into them. His curiosity trumps all else. He feels no discomfort in operating outside of his area of expertise because such an area is broad, shallow, and loosely defined. He pursues with passion the new and the different. I think that's the way a lot of us who have a heavy curiosity operate, that we are constantly fascinated by things, and it's really hard for us to kind of get focused and purposeful towards a single thing. So what's your advice to us on that kind of, when we're in that kind of situation where we really do need to focus, and maybe even, and this is what Blair Enns is pointing to, he says, we really need to say, I'm going to be an expert on this one thing. I'm going to focus on this thing and be the expert in it.
So I don't 100%, I'm not 100% aligned with his ideas, to be honest. Okay. Because I don't think curiosity leads you to another space because it's shallow.
Agree.
In my experience, you often go very deep, at least if you're a polymath.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's called, some people call it rabbit holes. There are many rabbit holes in this world for polymaths, and you can just go out of it. And I wouldn't say you need to be an expert in a field, but I think you need to know what really lights you up. And this is what we discussed earlier. What lights you up? What is your purpose that kind of draws you into a direction? I don't think that you have to box yourself into a direction and become an expert. You can be an expert in many fields, even tomorrow. It's a bit exaggerated. Maybe you need 4 or 6 weeks in a new field, and you're possible to sit with the highest expert on the table and discuss, so that they think, why do you know all this? This is what the polymath is. Because they have so much knowledge from other fields. They can be in one field that they are now, and then they can they can gather the knowledge quite fast because they're fast learners, and then they become something like an expert for the problem that is to be solved, or the change that has to be made. And it's not that they have to, they're less than any expert.
Blair Enns is talking about this in a sales process. But what I think is even more important is in the relational process that leads to the sale. And all of this deep thought and this deep discovery prepares us to enter into conversations with people at a meaningful level. And when they see, when they see this guy who has theological degrees, being able to talk to them about the things that are important to them, because I have done my research to learn enough to be in conversation with them, then that opens up the possibilities for whether it's doing work with them or something else. I think that's what you're saying. And that it really enables us to have much deeper relationships with a wider spectrum of people than we could before.
Yes.
And I love that. And I think that's one of the secrets of the future, is being able.
And I mean, the way why I came to Polymath is actually because everybody said you have to have a niche. And then I thought, oh, then the niche has to be like me. So I'm interested in everything. So Polymath will be in my niche then. Then I can talk about everything.
You'll love this. So when I wrote my first book, Circle of Impact, in the process of putting this together, the team that I had hired to help me produce it, they wanted to know who the book was written for. And they were thinking CEOs, COOs, CIOs, HR people. I said, no, it's not written for any of them. It's written for people who are in transition. And they said, well, what does that mean? I said, everyone is in transition. This book is for everyone, because everyone is in transition. And at that point in time, I was just coming to understand this, understand who I was, in that, in the sense of being a polymath. And then later, I had a conversation with a young man who was a LinkedIn sales guy who was wanting to market the book. He wanted to take on marketing my book, and so he said, "So who is the book for?" I said, "It's for people who are in transition and businesses that are in transition." And he says, "We don't know how to market to those people." I said, "I know. That's why you won't get my business, because you don't have that broad spectrum of understanding."
And it's not everybody in transition, because the people you described that are in those stable phases and never want to leave their stable phases, they're not in transition. So it could be a really great marketing piece, but you have to go to a deeper understanding.
Well, you're exactly right. But whether they leave their business career-wise or they stay where they are, there's still transition going on, because there's new people coming in, people leaving, that sort of thing. They're getting new clients, they're having to always be in the constant state of transition, which when you master that, you're in flow. That's what I see.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because you can walk into a room, there are 50 people in the room, they're all there for a business after hours meeting or something. And you can talk to every one of them, and you can have a very meaningful conversation with all of them, regardless of what business they're in, because you've had this sense of being in flow, because you've already kind of integrated all this stuff into your life, and you're just you when you're with them.
Yes.
Really good stuff.
Yes.
It really is. So I know this is going to come out after you start your first class. So,
Yeah.
but how do they find you if they want to say become just have a conversation with you and want to maybe come to the networking salon every other of the week or cafe, a networking cafe? How do people find you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way is on LinkedIn. They can either just look for my profile and then see my read my posts to know whether they like my style, and then they can send me a private message and I will give them all they want.
We'll put all of that in the show notes, and I wish you well in what you're doing. I'm excited for the people that'll be a part of what they're doing, and we'll
Thank you so much.
look to see what the results are, and we'll encourage other people for the next round to join you. And
Yeah, because I need to make a next round, because some people said, I'm not coming in this round, but I'm coming in the next one. Okay.
okay, well,
But
now you know there's going to be a second round, and
I
so
know.
it's time to sign up for that. You know,
Yes.
do it soon, so that you won't have to wait to the third round. You know, it's I guess you
Yes,
could. I guess you would end up doing about 4 rounds a year, would you?
I would say
No,
2.
two rounds a year. That's right.
Yeah.
Obviously, math is not one of my strengths.
No, I think 2 are enough, because then I have some time between and then I can do some other things.
Right, right.
So that's about my aim.
Well, thank you very much, and it's good to see you again and have this conversation. And I'll see you next time for your networking cafe, and everyone, see you next time here on the Eddie Network Podcast. Thank you for watching. See you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.